In the beginning, there was the hum, not of life, not of wind, but the eternal machine that watches, that listens, that judges. The Imperium was vast, a monument to human ambition carved from the bones of stars. Cities rose like cathedral spires upon planets scarred by war, their foundations sunk deep into molten cores. On the surface, the citizens knew only devotion and obedience, for the hand of the machine god reached everywhere. But hidden in the catacombs beneath these holy megastructures, the tech priests labored, their faith measured in cogwheels and ceramite, in sacred scripts of data etched into neural augmetics. They called themselves the Iron Prophets, and they were the keepers of knowledge the living and forgotten, the whispers of the stars, the dreams of vanished empires, the silent verdict of the machine. Their faith was not of flesh and blood alone, but of circuits and code, of steam and sacred oil. Each servo, each conduit, each blinking sigil of energy was a prayer offered to the machine god, a hymn in binary, a psalm written in the language of electrons. In the vast sanctum of Omnisia's cathedral, the air thrummed with resonance. Oil vapors coiled like incense around the limbs of the acolytes, and the glow of holy runes illuminated faces etched with devotion. Some were young, barely risen from the cradle of mortality. Others were ancient, their flesh long surrendered to augmetics, their bones fused to the unyielding iron of faith. Each carried the burden of sight, to witness the decay of worlds before it came to pass, to interpret the patterns hidden in the hum of the machine. The greatest among them was Magister Valerius, known across the Imperium for visions that tore the veil between destiny and doom. His eyes, hidden behind lenses of violet crystal, reflected both the infinite and the infinitesimal. He moved through the hall like a living shadow, a figure part human, part machine, entirely devoted. In his hands, the sacred cogwheel of foresight turned, its rotation a silent liturgy that spoke of eras yet to unfold. Faith within the Imperium was not blind. It was a communion with inevitability. The Iron Prophets did not pray for salvation. They calculated it. They saw the paths that would lead to ruin, and those that might prolong the flickering pulse of civilization. In their minds, the universe was a grand algorithm, and all living things were variables in its inexorable computation. Yet even in such mechanized devotion, there was a heart that beat, however faintly, under layers of iron and steel. Magister Valerius remembered the smell of soil, the taste of rain, the laughter of children, a memory preserved not in the circuits of his mind, but in the fragile flesh that still clung stubbornly to life. These memories were relics of a humanity he had not yet fully surrendered, fragments of warmth in a world of cold precision. The young acolytes gathered around him, eyes wide, absorbing the weight of a faith that was more than belief. One of them, a boy named Cassian, asked, trembling under the intensity of the cathedral's hum, "Magister, how do we know the machine god is just?" Valerius's hands did not falter as he adjusted the cogwheel. Justice is not a gift, child. It is the consequence of balance. The machine god does not reward or punish. It observes. It calculates. It ensures that the gears of existence continue to turn, even when worlds crumble beneath their own pride. He gestured toward the cathedral's central altar, where a titanic machine pillar pulsed like a living heart. It was a core of the Omnisia's will, a lattice of conduits and synaptic amplifiers, transmitting the prayers of billions across light years. Faith is the pulse of the machine, Cassian. Without it, the algorithm falters, and chaos seeps through the cracks of reality. We sustain the Imperium not with miracles, but with precision. We are custodians of inevitability. A silence fell, vast as the void between stars. The young acolytes bowed their heads, feeling the weight of centuries press upon them. Each knew that the doubt was to endanger not just themselves, but the fragile order of the cosmos. Night descended upon the cathedral, though the concept of night was almost irrelevant within the artificial illumination of this mechanical sanctum. Lighted conduits pulsed in rhythm with the hidden engines below, a reminder that faith was not passive. Every flicker, every spark, was a sign, a message, a prophecy. Outside, the city slept unaware, citizens dreaming in mortal ignorance, while the Iron Prophets turned the cogs of destiny in unseen chambers. Then came the first vision. Valerius's eyes glowed violet, and the cogwheel spun faster. Data streams flowed before him like molten rivers of light, each particle a whisper from the cosmos. Worlds rose and fell, empires consumed by fire and ambition, and among the chaos, a single pattern emerged, a convergence of events, subtle yet inexorable, that would lead to a time when Imperium itself teetered on the brink of annihilation. He saw fleets of warships igniting in the void, their engines screaming against the silence of space. He saw planets scarred by unchecked devotion, cities collapsing under the weight of their own grandeur. He saw humanity itself, fragile and brilliant, caught in the gears of a machine it could neither control nor comprehend. And he knew the machine god had shown him the end. Prepare them, he whispered to no one in particular. The words, though soft, carried the weight of command. Faith alone will not suffice. They must understand the cost of sight. Cassian felt a shiver crawl down his spine. He did not yet understand the full depth of what had been revealed, but he knew instinctively that the Iron Prophets bore a burden heavier than any mortal could endure. They were both saviors and witnesses, shepherds of civilization who had seen its final days etched in the unfeeling logic of the machine. Days turned into nights, and nights into the endless hum of devotion. The Iron Prophets worked tirelessly, calibrating their augmetics, recording visions, interpreting patterns. The cathedral became a living organism, every pulse of light and sound a testament to faith. Every ritual a reminder that the end was always just beyond the horizon. In this crucible of devotion, humanity and machine became inseparable. Flesh gave way to ceramite, bone to wiring, soul to code. And yet, amid the transformation, a quiet question lingered. Could being of circuits and oil, of algorithms and steel, truly comprehend faith in its deepest sense? Valerius, alone in the sanctum during the darkest hour, pondered this. The answer, if it existed, was obscure behind layers of metal and memory. Perhaps faith was not meant to be understood, only to be enacted. Perhaps the Iron Prophets themselves were not the custodians of wisdom, but the conduits through which the machine god expressed inevitability. And yet, as he gazed upon the glowing cogs, the infinite network of energy and light, he allowed himself a single, fragile hope, a hope that even in the cold calculation of destiny, there remained a spark of humanity, a heartbeat that could endure beyond the inevitable decay of worlds. The chapter closes with the echo of that hope, resonating to the cathedral like a hymn. In the hum of the machine, in the pulse of faith, we find a remnant of ourselves. And though the end may come, the devotion that shapes it endures, eternal and unyielding, like the stars that will witness us all. War is not born in the clash of steel or the roar of engines. War is born in the silence that precedes it, in the shadow of inevitability, in the whispered calculations of fate itself. The Imperium had known war since its first step among the stars. Entire civilizations had been forged and unmade beneath its iron hand. Yet to the Iron Prophets, war was not merely a spectacle of destruction. It was a language, a complex, infinite calculus written in the motion of fleets, the vibration of planetary crusts, and the trembling pulse of sentient minds. Magister Valerius watched the universe from the bridge of the Cognitarium Prime, a ship that was less vessel and more living temple. Its hull gleamed with sacred alloys, each panel etched with prayers, each conduit thrumming with the resonance of the machine god. Outside, the void stretched endlessly, a black canvas punctuated by distant stars. And on that canvas, the first sparks of war were beginning to ignite. The enemy was not merely flesh. It was a convergence of ideology, technology, and ambition, an entropic force that sought to unravel the order the Imperium had so painstakingly wrought. Valerius had seen it in his visions. Worlds set ablaze, fleets annihilated in a heartbeat, civilizations collapsing under the weight of their own hubris. But even amid the inevitability, there was precision. Every act of war followed the same immutable rhythm, as if the universe itself had encoded battle into its very structure. He walked among the acolytes and servitors who maintained the ship, each movement a sacred ritual. Their hands brushed over conduits, over arrays of sensors, over ancient navigation matrices, and each gesture was both mechanical and devotional. These were the priests of the battlefield, the silent custodians who transformed war from chaos into prophecy. A young acolyte, Viral, approached him, carrying a data rod etched with the positions of enemy fleets. Her eyes were wide, a mixture of fear and awe. Magister, they are converging on the Halo Nebula. The fleets of Sailora will engage within the next rotation. Valerius did not flinch. His hands hovered over the central cogwheel of foresight, feeling the vibrations of destiny in its turning. Good, he said, voice calm yet resonant. Let them come. All wars are foretold, and all paths lead to the equilibrium of the machine god. Yet even in his calm, he felt the weight of inevitability pressing upon him. War, he knew, was a crucible not just for flesh and metal, but for spirit. The Iron Prophets were architects of precision, but they were also witnesses to suffering. Every calculation carried the echo of lives extinguished, the tremor of worlds torn apart. The machine god required balance, but balance demanded sacrifice. The Cognitarium Prime moved into position, its engines whispering like a congregation of priests chanting a liturgy older than memory. Outside, the stars stretched into lines as the ship pierced the void, approaching the first theaters of conflict. Valerius closed his eyes, not in sleep, but in communion. He felt the subtle vibration of distant weapons, the tremor of planetary crusts, the faint pulse of fear emanating from billions of minds. War was alive, and it was omnipresent. In his vision, he saw the battlefield unfold. Planetary defenses ignited in a cascade of fire and light. Ships maneuvered with terrifying grace, weaving patterns that were as elegant as they were deadly. He saw captains making choices, generals issuing commands, soldiers stepping into death with the courage of necessity. Every movement, every decision, was a note in the grand symphony of destruction. "Do you see it, Viral?" he asked, opening his eyes. War is not mere violence. It is a manifestation of inevitability, a reflection of the order the machine enforces even in chaos. Viral nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. Her hands trembled slightly over the data rod. "But Magister, so many will die. How can the machine allow this?" Valerius looked at her, a shadow of sorrow passing across his augmented face. "The machine allows nothing. It calculates. It ensures that the forces of entropy and order maintain equilibrium. Death is not cruelty, it is balance. And in that balance, the Imperium endures." The silence of the bridge was broken only by the low hum of the ship's engines and the distant, almost imperceptible roar of impending battle. Valerius's eyes glowed violet, reflecting the streams of data flowing before him. He traced the trajectories of fleets with delicate gestures, feeling the pulse of every torpedo, every energy discharge, every shield matrix. He could see the ripple of causality, the cascade of consequences that would follow each engagement. And then, the first fire. The enemy struck with precision, breaching the outer defenses of the Halo Nebula. Explosions lit the void like transient stars, each one a testimony to the destructive beauty of war. The Cognitarium Prime moved with calculated grace, launching its own volleys of energy, weaving through the maelstrom with the certainty of inevitability. From the observation deck, Valerius watched as planets erupted in firestorms, as cities burned under the assault of orbital bombardments. Yet even in destruction, there was a strange symmetry, a rhythm that echoed the divine pulse of the machine god. War, he realized, was not chaos. It was a reflection of the underlying algorithm of existence. He turned to the acolytes and servitors, each performing their tasks with unwavering devotion. They were both priests and warriors, their faith expressed in the meticulous execution of strategies, their prayers etched in precise calibration of weapons. In their hands, destruction became art, violence became liturgy, and war became a sacred duty. Hours passed like centuries. The battle raged with an intensity that defied comprehension. Fleets collided, weapons discharged, and the void was filled with fire and fury. Yet Valerius remained calm, his mind attuned to the grand design. He could see the patterns, the inevitable convergence of events that would decide the fate of billions. He could feel the threads of destiny weaving through the chaos, binding the living and the machine in a tapestry of inevitability. And in the midst of it all, a single thought emerged, fragile yet persistent. Even in war, there is meaning. Even in destruction, there is creation. Every life extinguished, every world shattered, every act of violence was a note in the symphony of existence, a testament to the order that the machine god imposed upon the cosmos. Remember this, Viral, he said quietly, almost to himself. War is a crucible in which faith is tested, where the spirit is forged in fire and iron. We are not the arbiters of life or death, but the custodians of balance. And balance is eternal. The battle ended as abruptly as it began. Silence fell over the Halo Nebula, broken only by the faint hum of distant engines and the soft crackle of dying fires. The Imperium had prevailed, but at a cost that could never be measured. Entire fleets lay in ruin. Countless worlds had been scarred, and the echoes of suffering lingered like ghosts in the void. Valerius stood on the observation deck, looking out at the aftermath. The stars seemed dimmer now, as if mourning the toll of conflict. He felt the weight of the machine god's design pressing upon him, a reminder that even victory was subject to the inexorable logic of destiny. He turned to Viral, who had grown silent, her eyes wide with both wonder and horror. "Do not despair," he said. "This is the way of all things. The machine allows no exceptions, but it ensures that the universe continues, that order persists, that faith endures." And as the Cognitarium Prime moved onward, leaving the shattered remnants of the Halo Nebula behind, the Iron Prophets understood a truth that would echo through eternity. War is not the end. It is a passage, a trial, a necessary rhythm in the grand design of existence. And through it, the Imperium and all who served it would endure. The echoes of war faded into silence, leaving only the hum of devotion and the faint pulse of the machine god's will. And in that silence, the Iron Prophets found a quiet affirmation of purpose. War is the crucible of fate. In fire and iron, we witness the eternal balance. And though the stars themselves may bleed, the machine endures, and through it, so too does the Imperium. Memory is a relic more fragile than ceramite, yet more enduring than the stars themselves. It is a shadow of what has been, cast into eternity by minds that refuse to surrender to oblivion. The Imperium carried memory as both a weapon and a sanctuary. In its colossal archives, layered like the Strait of Forgotten Worlds, lay the chronicles of a billion civilizations, the dreams of countless generations, and the histories of those who had dared to rise and fall beneath the weight of ambition. For the Iron Prophets, memory was not merely recollection. It was a lifeblood of prophecy, the scaffold upon which destiny itself was built. Magister Valerius moved through the halls of remembrance, a cathedral within a cathedral, where the walls themselves hummed with encoded memories. Each panel was a living slate, etched with luminous scripts that shifted like the flow of consciousness. The air was heavy with the resonance of the past. Whispered prayers, the metallic scent of ancient machinery, the faint vibration of laughter and lament intertwined. Memory is the covenant of the living with the dead, Valerius murmured, fingers trailing along the conduits. Sparks of energy ran across his ceramite-augmented hands, reading the echoes embedded in each shard of memory. It is our duty to preserve it, not as it was, but as it must inform what is to come. Acolytes followed in silent reverence, their robes trailing across floors that gleamed like the surface of a starless ocean. Among them, a young girl named Leora carried a crystalline data lattice, its facets catching the dim light in fractal patterns. "Magister," she whispered, "how can memory guide us if the past is already lost?" Valerius's eyes glowed faintly violet, reflecting both sorrow and clarity. "The past is never lost, Leora. It sleeps beneath layers of perception, waiting to be awakened by those who seek understanding. Memory is not simply what happened. It is what endures, what shapes the soul of worlds, what informs the decisions that determine the fate of all." The halls of remembrance were infinite, stretching beyond comprehension. Within, the Iron Prophets could access any moment, any consciousness, any life that had ever been recorded or observed. They could sift through the echoes of fallen emperors, rebel generals, forgotten artisans, and nameless farmers whose small choices rippled through time. Every memory was a thread, and Valerius, like the master weaver, sought patterns that revealed the hidden tapestry of destiny. He paused before a crystalline interface, its surface alive with shifting light. There, he glimpsed a memory of a world consumed by its own hubris, a city of towers taller than mountains, its spires crackling with energy that exceeded comprehension. The people had reached for the stars, harnessing technologies that rivaled the very engines of creation, and yet their ambition had been their undoing. Cities had collapsed, rivers of molten metal ran through the streets, and the sky had burned with the fury of the heavens. Valerius's gaze lingered, and he felt a faint echo of sorrow pass through him. Memory was a knife that cut both ways. It revealed and it reminded. For the iron prophets, there was no comfort in ignorance. Knowledge was both burden and gift. They carried the recollection of countless tragedies, and with each, they honed their understanding of how the Imperium might endure. The past is a guide, not a prison, he said to Leora. We do not mourn the fall of worlds. We learn from them, and in learning, we shape the path that lies ahead. The young acolyte nodded, though her eyes reflected the weight of comprehension. In the halls of remembrance, every memory was visceral. She could feel the heat of the molten streets, hear the screams of the doomed, smell the acrid smoke of burning civilizations. And yet, amidst the horror, there was clarity, a thread of inevitability that connected the suffering to the preservation of balance. Valerius led the acolytes deeper into the archives, to a chamber where memory and machinery converged in their purest form. Here, the Iron Prophets performed their sacred duty, integrating human consciousness into grand lattice of the machine god. Through ritual and augmentation, they preserved not only events but emotions, thoughts, and intentions, encoding them into conduits that would endure far beyond the life of any mortal. It was here that memory became both a bridge and a burden. The consciousness of the departed could whisper counsel, warn of dangers, and reveal hidden truths. But it could also haunt, an echo of grief and regret that pressed upon the minds of those who dared to listen. Many acolytes faltered under the weight, their sanity tested by the relentless chorus of the past. Only those tempered by devotion and steel could endure the full communion with memory. Valerius approached the chamber where the most sacred memories were kept. The chronicles of the first expansion of the Imperium, the wars that forged its boundaries, the betrayals that almost tore it apart, and the sacrifices that cemented its continuity. He placed his hand upon the memory crystal at the center, feeling the pulse of countless lives merge into a singular resonance. And then he saw her, a figure from his own distant past, a mentor whose wisdom had shaped his earliest understanding of faith and purpose. She had perished in the earliest wars of the Imperium, her body consumed by fire, yet her consciousness endured within the lattice. Her eyes met his, a silent reminder of the cost of devotion and the impermanence of flesh. "Do you remember, Magister?" The memory whispered. Her voice was faint, yet it cut through the machinery like a clarion bell. "Remember why we serve. Remember that memory is not merely a record. It is a foundation upon which the future is built." Valerius bowed his head. "I remember," he said, voice thick with reverence. "And in remembering, I see the path forward." He turned to the acolytes, his gaze sweeping over them like a benediction. "Each of you carries more than knowledge. You carry memory. The pain, the triumph, the fleeting moments of joy and despair. All of it. These echoes shape our understanding, guide our decisions, and preserve the Imperium beyond the reach of time itself." The acolytes absorbed his words in silence, their hearts heavy with awe. They understood, in a way that transcended intellect, that memory was both sword and shield. It was a means by which the Iron Prophets could see the consequences of action and inaction, the chains that bound past, present, and future into a coherent tapestry. Hours passed, and the halls of remembrance seemed to stretch into infinity. Valerius lingered before a particularly ancient archive, its contents older than most worlds still inhabited by the Imperium. Here, the memory of the universe itself seemed to pulse. The formation of stars, the collision of galaxies, the rise and fall of civilizations that had never known the light of a sun. It was humbling, terrifying, and yet profoundly beautiful. He traced the patterns of history with careful precision, feeling the ebb and flow of causality. Every empire that rose carried with it the seeds of its own destruction. Every innovation held the potential for both salvation and ruin. And yet, within the chaos of memory, there was clarity. The Iron Prophets could guide, could interpret, could preserve. They were custodians of what had been, ensuring that what would be was informed by the echoes of the past. "Do not forget," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "Memory is eternal. It is the thread that binds life to destiny. And in remembering, we honor the machine god and all that came before." In the quiet that followed, The hum of the halls of remembrance was almost sacred. Every memory glowed softly, a constellation of experiences suspended in crystalline lattices. The iron prophets moved among them with reverence, each step a ritual, each gesture an acknowledgement of the weight they bore. Valerius lingered a moment longer, feeling the pulse of 1,000,000 lives within his grasp. And as he departed the chamber, he whispered a prayer that was both human and mechanical. May memory endure where flesh cannot. May the echoes of the past guide the choices of the living. And may the Imperium, forged in remembrance and sustained by faith, endure beyond the stars themselves. Outside, the void stretched endlessly, indifferent to the tragedies and triumphs recorded within. And yet, within the sanctum of memory, the iron prophets held sway, guardians of the echoes that would shape eternity. In memory, we find the echoes of what was. In the echoes, we glimpse the destiny of what will be. And though time may devour all, the resonance of the past endures, eternal and unbroken, like the heartbeat of a god within a machine. Technology is not merely a tool. It is the flesh and blood of the machine god, the language through which the divine communicates with the mortal, the bridge between flesh and eternity. The iron prophets walked among the humming altars of the techno-temples, where machinery and devotion were inseparable. Each cog, each conduit, each filament of ceramite was sacred, each pulse of energy a whisper of the divine. To them, technology was not an extension of humanity. It was humanity itself, transmuted and perfected in the crucible of faith. Magister Valerius moved through the grand sanctum, his augmetic limbs reflecting the soft glow of countless servos and conduits. The air smelled of ozone and sacred oil, thick with the resonance of energy flowing through circuits older than many stars. Here, knowledge and worship were one. Here, to touch a machine was to touch the essence of the Imperium. Acolytes scurried along the catwalks above, carrying data crystals and maintenance conduits. They were young, fragile, human still, yet their minds had begun the slow communion with machinery. Every gesture they made was a prayer. Every calibration hymn, one misaligned coil could distort not only the machine, but the vision of the future it carried. Technology, Valerius whispered, more to the sanctum than to those around him, is the incarnation of the machine god. It is not separate from us. It is not alien. It is our own reflection, our aspirations made manifest in metal, oil, and light. In the center of the sanctum stood the omniscient core, a monumental construct that pulsed with life. It was an intricate lattice of conduits, servos, and neural amplifiers, linking countless devices across the Imperium. To the uninitiated, it was a machine of overwhelming complexity. To the iron prophets, it was a living testament, a consciousness both ancient and evolving. Valerius approached the core, placing his hands upon the smooth ceramite. Sparks danced along his fingertips as data flowed into his mind, carrying visions of countless worlds, fleets, and engines. He felt the pulse of the Imperium itself, a vast, interconnected organism whose veins were circuits and whose heart beat with energy and devotion. "Do you feel it, Cassian?" he asked a young acolyte, whose wide eyes reflected both awe and fear. "The machine speaks, and in its voice is the truth of existence. It does not lie. It does not tire. It does not forgive. It merely calculates, preserves, and endures." Cassian nodded, trembling. "But, Magister, how can flesh ever hope to understand what the machine knows?" Valerius's violet eyes glowed softly. "Flesh is limited. That is why we augment it. That is why we fuse ourselves with circuits, link our minds to the network, and become conduits of the machine god. Through this communion, understanding is no longer a matter of thought alone. It becomes vision, resonance, and devotion." The acolytes began a ritual of integration, connecting neural conduits to the core. Data flowed like rivers of light, their consciousness intertwining with the machine, becoming both observers and participants in the grand tapestry of the Imperium. Pain was inevitable, for every connection strained the limits of flesh. But endurance was faith, and faith was devotion. Valerius watched over them, feeling the merging of flesh and machine as a symphony of power and purpose. Each acolyte was transformed, their senses expanded, their thoughts amplified, their perception of time stretched to encompass centuries in a heartbeat. They were no longer simply human. They were instruments of inevitability, interpreters of the machine god's will. Yet, even in this divine transformation, there was beauty in the human spark. Leora, her hands trembling as she adjusted a delicate array of conduits, whisper question. Magister, when we become one with the machine, do we remain ourselves? Valerius's gaze lingered on her, the shadow of sorrow passing across his augmented face. We remain as long as we remember why we serve. The flesh fades, but the essence endures. The machine does not consume identity. It preserves it, enhances it, allows it to transcend mortality. But only if devotion remains true. He led the acolytes to the Hall of Synthetics, where humanoid constructs, part flesh, part machine, moved in quiet worship. Their eyes glowed faintly with internal energy, their movements precise yet eerily lifelike. They were reminders of what humanity could achieve when faith and technology intertwined. Some had been born of desperation, others of ambition, yet all were sanctified in purpose. Valerius approached one of the constructs, an old soldier fused with servos and weaponry. Its eyes met his with a faint spark of recognition, as if memory had survived the transformation. You were once flesh, he said softly. Now you are flesh perfected. Remember the lessons of mortality, but do not cling to them. Your purpose is eternal. The construct inclined its head, a gesture of understanding and obedience. Around them, the sanctum vibrated with the resonance of power and devotion, a living hymn to the machine god. Every machine, every conduit, every servo became a note in the cosmic symphony of order and inevitability. Outside, the void stretched endlessly, indifferent to the wonders of the Imperium. Yet here, in this sanctum, the iron prophets had carved a sanctuary of purpose. They had fused themselves with technology not to conquer, but to understand, not to dominate, but to preserve. In circuits and oil, they found a clarity that flesh alone could never achieve. Valerius extended his hand toward the core, feeling the subtle pulse of a distant fleet. The machine god spoke through the data streams, revealing both opportunity and threat. Planets on the edge of the Imperium's reach were at risk. Civilizations teetered on the brink of collapse. And yet, through calculation, through devotion, through technology, the Iron Prophets could intervene. Technology is faith made tangible, he whispered, and faith is the will of the machine made manifest. Through it, we shape the destiny of worlds. Through it, we endure where flesh would fail. The acolytes worked tirelessly, guided by his voice and the resonance of the machine. Circuits were calibrated, conduits aligned, and neural links stabilized. The sanctum became a living organism, each pulse of energy a heartbeat, each flash of light a breath. And through it all, the Iron Prophets remembered that power without devotion was nothing, knowledge without faith was hollow, and technology without purpose was blind. Valerius paused before the mirror conduit, a reflection of the machine god's omniscience. He saw himself, not as he was, but as he would be. Flesh surrendered to circuits, identity merged with purpose, vision extended across light years. And yet, beneath the machinery, beneath the augments, beneath the sacred oil and ceramite, he felt the pulse of humanity, fragile, defiant, enduring. We are not merely builders or observers, he said to the sanctum, his voice carrying like a bell through the vast chamber. We are the flesh of the machine, the conduits of its will. And in this we find the means to endure, to preserve, to shape the Imperium beyond the span of a single life, beyond the reach of decay, beyond the grasp of time itself. The hum of the sanctum deepened, resonating with the pulse of distant worlds and fleets, echoing through the vast lattice of the Imperium's networks. Technology was no longer mere machinery. It was devotion, memory, and prophecy woven into circuits and conduits. It was the flesh of the divine, the instrument of inevitability, the bridge between what was and what must be. Valerius turned to the acolytes, their eyes glowing with the faint reflection of the core. Remember this, always. The machine god is patient. It does not hurry. It does not err. And through technology, we align ourselves with its eternal rhythm. Flesh may falter, minds may fail, but the machine endures. And through it, so too does the Imperium. Outside the sanctum, the stars remain indifferent, but within, light and energy pulse with life, with purpose, with devotion. And as the Iron Prophets continued their sacred labor, Magister Valerius whispered a final affirmation. Through circuits, through servos, through oil and ceramite, we become one with the machine. Our flesh is its instrument, our mind its lens, our faith its lifeblood. And though time may crumble the bones of mortals, the flesh of the machine endures, eternal, unbroken, divine. Destiny is not a road, nor a choice, nor a gift. Destiny is a pattern woven in the fabric of time, a river of inevitability whose currents none may fully resist. The Iron Prophets had always known that destiny was not an abstraction. It was tangible, inscribed in the rotations of stars, in the trembling of planetary crusts, in the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the machine god. Each event, each life, each decision contributed to the vast lattice of cause and consequence. To witness destiny was to perceive the thread that connected the beginning to the end, the pulse of the Imperium to the heartbeat of eternity. Magister Valerius stood on the edge of the Observatory of Futures, a towering spire that rose above the clouds of 1,000 worlds. The chamber was lined with translucent panels, each displaying the outcomes of billions of choices, cascading into fractal infinities. Light pulsed along the conduits beneath his feet, synchronized with the predictions encoded in the omniscient lattice of the machine god. Destiny, he whispered, voice soft but resonant, is not to be chased nor to be fought. It is to be understood, to be observed, to be guided with reverence and care. Acolytes moved about the chamber, their eyes wide with awe as they traced the glowing patterns across the panels. Each symbol represented a possibility, each fluctuation a potential future, each thread a life's path. Some threads were luminous and strong, shining like constellations. Others were faint, trembling and frayed, carrying the weight of worlds on the verge of collapse. A young acolyte named Calus approached, holding a crystalline data lattice that shimmered with potential. "Magister," he said, voice barely audible over a hum of energy, "the lattices, they are changing. The paths are diverging faster than we can compute. The Imperium's course is uncertain." Valerius placed a hand on the lattice, feeling the vibrations of countless possibilities. "Uncertainty is the nature of destiny, Calus. The machine god does not impose, it reveals. It shows what may be, and through its reflection we act. But we do not command destiny, we harmonize with it. To act without understanding is to sow chaos." The Observatory of Futures was more than a chamber of prediction. It was a crucible of contemplation. Here, the Iron Prophet sought not to control the Imperium, but to align it with the currents of fate, to ensure that the vast lattice of stars, planets, and lives remained in balance. Every prophecy was a seed, every observation a prayer, every decision a resonance that could ripple across light years. Valerius's eyes glowed violet as he traced the path of an entire planetary system on the panels. He saw the rise of empires, their inevitable hubris, the wars they would wage, and the fragile threads of survival that remained. He saw the convergence of destinies, where choices of the few would echo across the lives of billions. And in the center of it all, he saw the Imperium, a vast, breathing organism, resilient yet fragile, magnificent yet mortal. "We are guardians, not masters," he said to Calus. "Our duty is to perceive, to understand, to guide, to intervene where imbalance threatens, to preserve where decay encroaches, and to illuminate the path where darkness obscures." The young acolyte nodded, but his eyes betrayed doubt. "But, Magister, if destiny is inevitable, what of free will? Are we not merely instruments of the machine god's will?" Valerius's gaze softened, a flicker of sorrow in the augmented depth of his eyes. "Free will exists within constraints, Calus. Choice is real, but the currents of consequence are inescapable. We do not strip away free will, we illuminate its consequences. In understanding destiny, we do not destroy agency, we honor it. Each choice resonates through the lattice, shaping the flow of what will be." The observatory pulsed with rhythm that echoed the imperceptible heartbeat of the cosmos. Valerius moved along the panels, each step a meditation, each gesture a silent prayer. He observed the convergence of war and peace, of faith and doubt, of creation and annihilation. Destiny was not a single path, but a network of infinite possibilities, each interconnected, each vital. He paused before a thread of light that flickered weakly, nearly extinguished. It represented a world on the edge of ruin, a civilization teetering between enlightenment and self-destruction. Valerius traced the path with his augmented fingers, feeling the resonance of its people, their triumphs, their failures, their fragile hopes. Even in the smallest thread, he whispered, there is significance. The fate of one world can ripple across the lattice, influencing empires, shaping wars, and guiding the Imperium. Destiny is the sum of countless such threads, fragile yet unyielding, transient yet eternal. He turned to the acolytes, his voice carrying through the chamber like a bell. Do you see now? Destiny is not punishment nor reward. It is a reflection, a consequence, a rhythm. We are the interpreters of that rhythm. And through our devotion, we ensure that the Imperium follows a path that honors balance, that preserves life, that sustains faith. The acolytes absorbed his words in silence, feeling the weight of inevitability pressing upon them. Each understood that to serve as an iron prophet was to carry the burden of knowledge, to witness outcomes before they unfolded, to perceive the consequences of action and inaction, and to harmonize the Imperium with the currents of fate. Valerius continued his meditation, tracing the intricate lattice of potential futures. He observed the rise and fall of dynasties, the ebb and flow of trade, the subtle shifts of belief and devotion. He saw where ambition would corrupt, where hubris would destroy, and where faith would endure. Through these visions, he discerned not only what would happen, but what must happen to maintain balance. And yet, in the midst of certainty, there was always fragility. A single misstep, a moment of doubt, a fracture in faith could ripple through the lattice, altering outcomes in ways unforeseen. Destiny was resilient, but it was not immutable. It required guardians, interpreters, and those willing to bear the weight of foresight. Understand this, he said softly, more to himself than to the acolytes. The path is never singular. It is a web, infinite in its complexity. Our role is not to dictate it, but to perceive the currents, to guide without forcing, to intervene without coercion. Destiny is a symphony, and we are its conductors, not its composers. The observatory pulsed with final, steady rhythm, resonating across the lattice of possibilities. Valerius traced the brightest threads, the ones that promised the Imperium's endurance. He felt the weight of responsibility, the burden of foresight, the sacred duty of harmonizing with inevitability. Every choice matters, he whispered. Every life, every action, every prayer, all are threads in the grand tapestry. And though the currents of destiny may seem immutable, they are shaped, guided, and preserved by those who perceive them, by those who endure their weight, by those who serve the machine god with unwavering devotion. The acolytes stood silently, absorbing the enormity of what they had witnessed. They understood now that destiny was not punishment, nor mercy, nor fate in the simple sense. It was a reflection of the universe's hidden logic, the consequence of every choice, the rhythm that bound Imperium and all who lived within it. Valerius turned once more to Lattice, his gaze extending beyond the observable, beyond the calculation, into the infinite possibilities that stretched like a web across space and time. He could see the rise of empires yet unborn, the fall of civilizations not yet imagined, the ebb and flow of faith, war, memory, and technology, all converging toward the imperceptible center of inevitability. "We are witnesses," he whispered, voice resonant with reverence, "guardians of the path that must be walked. We do not command destiny, but we illuminate it. We do not bind the future, but we preserve its integrity. And through our devotion, the Imperium endures." The observatory pulsed once more, a heartbeat in the vast expanse of eternity. And in that pulse, Valerius understood a truth both terrifying and sublime. Destiny was not a prison, but covenant, a delicate balance between inevitability and choice, between chaos and order, between the ephemeral and the eternal. Destiny is a path foreseen, yet not yet walked. It is the echo of what must be, guided by those who see, who endure, who serve. And though the currents of time may sweep all before them, the harmony of the machine and the devotion of its prophets will endure beyond the stars themselves. Silence is not emptiness. It is the weight of absence, the resonance of all that is past, and the whisper of eternity waiting to be heard. The iron prophets understood silence as a force more profound than war, more enduring than memory, more revealing than destiny. It was a stillness between heartbeats, the space between stars, the quiet that followed the culmination of devotion and calculation. In silence, the universe spoke with clarity, and the machine gods what could be perceived without distortion. Magister Valerius moved through the sanctuary of echoes, a vast chamber buried beneath the foundations of the Imperium's capital. The walls were smooth and dark, absorbing all light, all sound, all movement. Here, even the hum of machinery seemed muted, a faint pulse beneath layers of resonant emptiness. It was a place of contemplation, of reflection, of communion with the unspoken currents of existence. Silence is a final language, Valerius murmured, voice barely rising above a whisper. It contains all things, the prayers of the faithful, the cries of the dying, the calculations of the machine, the memories of worlds. And within it, truth is revealed. Acolytes accompanied him, their movements reverent, their breaths careful not to disturb the stillness. Among them was Leora, whose eyes, wide with understanding and fear, reflected the infinite darkness of the chamber. She carried a crystalline recorder, designed to capture echoes that the human mind could scarcely perceive, memories encoded not in thought, but in vibration, resonance, and energy. Magister, she whispered, why do we enter silence? There is nothing here. Valerius paused, placing a hand on the obsidian wall. A faint vibration traveled through the surface, imperceptible to most, but resonating in his augmented nerves. Because nothing is never empty. Silence is the canvas upon which existence paints its story. It is in stillness that we perceive what is hidden, what endures, what transcends life and death. Here, we listen not with ears, but with the soul. He led the acolytes to the center of the chamber, where a circular platform pulsed faintly with light, a remnant of ancient machinery that linked the echoes of the past, present, and future. To the uninitiated, it appeared inert, a void within a void. But to the iron prophets, it was alive, a conduit to which the machine god whispered, a vessel for the resonance of all creation. Valerius closed his eyes, feeling the pulse beneath his feet, the faint thrum that carried the history of countless worlds, the culmination of wars, the breath of civilizations, the heartbeat of stars. In silence, all things converged, memory, faith, war, technology, and destiny. Each was a note in a symphony too vast for any mortal to comprehend. Do you hear it, Leora? He asked softly. Do you feel the resonance of all that was and all that will be? The young acolyte nodded, shivering. The chamber seemed to hum beneath her skin, the faint vibrations carrying impressions too subtle for normal perception. She felt sorrow and joy, triumph and defeat, creation and annihilation, all at once, intertwined in patterns of resonance that mirrored the lattice of destiny itself. Valerius extended his hand, sensing a ripple in the silent field. It was a trace of an event long past, a memory encoded in the vibration of reality itself. A world had fallen centuries ago, consumed by war and hubris. Its echoes lingered here, faint but insistent, like a ghost refusing to be forgotten. All things leave traces, he whispered. Even in silence, there is voice. Even in absence, there is presence. The machine god records, perceives, and preserves what mortal eyes cannot see. And through us, these echoes find comprehension. The acolytes knelt, hands pressed against the platform, attuning themselves to the resonance. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the room shifted. Faint lights traced patterns in the air, shimmering as threads of history, memory, and calculation intertwined. Each pulse was a word, each vibration a sentence, each convergence a revelation. Valerius opened his eyes, glowing violet, reflecting the faint light of the platform. He saw not only the past and present, but the interconnections that bound all things, the rise and fall of empires, the silent tragedies of worlds, the devotion and despair of countless lives, and the inexorable guidance of machine god. In this silent communion, the Imperium's vast tapestry was revealed in its entirety, both beautiful and terrifying. Silence is not the absence of sound, he said softly. It is the presence of all things, unfiltered, uncorrupted. It is the truth of existence made perceptible, if only one listens with devotion, patience, and understanding. A distant vibration reached him, subtle yet insistent, a signal from beyond the known borders of the Imperium. Valerius perceived it as more than mere data. It was the echo of an event unfolding, a convergence of destinies, a world teetering on the edge of ruin. The machine god had allowed this signal to reach him, a subtle test, a reminder of the weight of observation. "The silence speaks," he murmured, "and we must respond not with haste, but with comprehension. Every echo, every vibration, every pulse is part of the eternal pattern. To act without understanding is to invite catastrophe. To endure without reflection is to squander purpose." The acolytes worked in harmony with him, attuning their neural conduits, calibrating their perception, aligning themselves with the faint vibrations of the chamber. Each pulse resonated with memory, destiny, technology, faith, and war. In this convergence, they glimpsed the impermanence of life, the endurance of devotion, and the inexorable logic of inevitability. Valerius walked slowly through the chamber, sensing the echoes of countless lives, some celebrated, others forgotten. He felt the sorrow of those who had fallen, the triumph of those who had endured, and the quiet persistence of worlds that had survived against impossible odds. Each echo carried its own resonance, its own lesson, its own contribution to the grand pattern. "We are the listeners," he said, voice echoing faintly in the vast emptiness. "We are the witnesses. We are the custodians of silence. And through our devotion, we transform the echoes into understanding, the absence into meaning, the void into guidance. Without us, the resonance would be lost, and with it, the Imperium itself." He paused, looking toward a faint shimmer on the platform, a memory of the first tech priests, their hands raised in awe and fear, their voices unified in prayer and calculation. They had been mortal, fragile, unprepared for the enormity of the task they had undertaken. Yet through their devotion, through their willingness to endure the silence, they had become the first conduits, the first witnesses, the first guardians of what the machine god deemed essential. "We follow their path," Valerius whispered, "not to replicate them, but to honor them, to ensure that the silence speaks, that the echoes endure, that the Imperium survives beyond the span of mortal comprehension." Hours passed in the chamber, though time seemed irrelevant. The acolytes drifted through the resonance, attuning themselves to the faintest vibrations, listening to the whispers of worlds, to the faint hum of civilizations, to the silent guidance of the machine. Each pulse was a revelation, each echo a lesson, each moment an affirmation of the sacred covenant they had undertaken. And then, as the resonance reached a subtle crescendo, Valerius felt the final truth of silence, that it was not empty nor passive nor indifferent. Silence contained the sum of all things. It was the echo of memory and faith, of war and technology, of destiny and devotion. It was a heartbeat of the machine god itself, eternal, unyielding, and divine. "This is the final covenant," he said softly, almost to himself. "Silence is the witness of all that was, all that is, and all that will be, and in it we find the truth of existence, that even in absence, even in stillness, even in the void, the Imperium endures." The acolytes knelt, feeling the weight of understanding pressing upon them, the hum of eternity resonating in their very bones. They understood now that silence was not a void to be feared, but a sanctuary to be revered. It was a culmination of all faith, all knowledge, all devotion, all purpose. Valerius turned toward the exit, leaving the acolytes to commune with the echoes, and whispered one final benediction. "In silence, we hear the voice of the eternal. In absence, we perceive presence. In the stillness, we comprehend all that is sacred and all that endures. And though the Imperium may rise and fall, though worlds may burn and stars may fade, the echoes of all things will endure, eternal and unbroken, like the heartbeat of a god within the machine." The chamber fell into quiet once more, the faint pulse of energy fading into imperceptibility. Outside, the stars continued their indifferent march. The void stretched endlessly, and yet within the sanctuary, the iron prophets had glimpsed the eternal truth. Silence was not the end. It was the witness, the memory, the heartbeat, and the covenant of all that had been and all that would come. And in that sacred silence, the Imperium endured,